So recapping, in the last video I made, or the first video I made, I was introduced to a book by a good friend of mine, and I pursued it. I talked to the author. I'm not going to name the name of the book, and I'm not going to name the author. I don't feel that that's fair for this purpose, but um, as I said last night, while I was waiting for the book to arrive, actually, while I was waiting for it to be released, I had a period of probably several weeks where I had the time to read a lot of this man's material on social media and to listen to his videos. And again, as I said last night, I heard this reoccurring theme that he seems to just hit over and over and over again on a real consistent basis. And that is that America wasn't founded as a Christian nation. It was founded by white supremacists for white men to be governed by white supremacists. And as a result, 250 or over 250 years later, us white people are enjoying the privileges of a capitalistic system that was built on the backs of slaves. And so we're complicit, which means that we're guilty. We didn't do it, but we're enjoying that privilege. We're enjoying the perks and the advantages that were given to us as white people by our white supremacist forefathers who built this capitalistic system on the backs of black slaves. Now, I could go into a lot here to say why I don't agree with that, but right now, I will take, pretty much point by point some of the salient things that I hear coming from this man, and I want to address them, okay? So, the first one is that race or racism is the ideology of white people. Race is a social construct originated by white people. Now, if you just take that on its face and you don't really peel that onion, you don't really think about it, you don't really have any way to come against that. You don't have any real way to refute that. But here's the thing that I'm going to bring out. We'll start with one of the foundational principles of race being the construct of white people that started about 300 years ago. Before 300 years ago, there was no white or black. We identified ourselves by not white and black, but by nationality. Well, I wasn't around for 300 years ago, so I don't really know. But I do know this, that one of the ways that supposedly happened, according to this author, was that there was a man by the name of Johannes Blumenbach. I believe I'm saying that right. And Johannes Blumenbach was a white supremacist German scientist who came up with a division for all the people on the earth, and he divided them up into 5 races, and he placed the white men at the top and the black men at the bottom. So the question is, for me, my first question to research is, who was Johannes Blumenbach, and did he divide the races up into 5 groups, placing the white man at the top and the black man at the bottom? So I do my due diligence, and I look him up, and guess what? Johannes Blumenbach did place all the peoples in the world into 5 groups, 5 different races, And that's where it stops. Um, Now, the idea of bringing in Johannes Blumenbach is because that the author claims that the white supremacist founding fathers of this country used his model of the black man on top, the white man on top and the black man on bottom, as a excuse or as a reason or a justification for slavery. Well, Joseph Blumenbach did not put the black man at the bottom and the white man on top. In fact, Joseph Blumenbach did not believe, if you research further than just the first things that you see on social media or the first thing that you come across, if you reach further and further back and you go to the people, to other historians, you find out that he didn't believe in supremacy of any race, in his own words. And you find out that, in fact, Blumenbach said this, and I'm paraphrasing, that if you were to search through all the nobles and the elitists and all of the royal families in Europe, you'd be hard-pressed to find a man who was as astute, artistic, creative, intuitive, inventive as the black man. And that the black man, according to his own words, Johannes Blumenbach's own words, the black man, that nobody had, no other race or no other people group had contributed more to the advancement of civilization than the black man. Now, why would a man who says that as a scientist and who believes that as a scientist, a man who does not believe that there's a superior race, put a construct, a social construct of white supremacy with the white man at the top and the black man at the bottom of the ladder? Why would that happen? Well, it comes to find out, see, there were other scientists in the in that time, which was the beginning of what they taught the Age of Enlightenment, or I believe that's what they called it, in Europe, who were following Blumenbach's work, and they put the white man at the top and the black man at the bottom. And when that began to fall into disfavor, they blamed Blumenbach. And they blamed it on a translation error of his work. And well, we kind of learned that from Blumenbach. You know, he's kind of the one who came up with his 5 races, and he, you know, he put the white man at the top and the black man at the bottom. Well, no, he didn't. They did, but they blamed him for it. After he was dead, after he couldn't defend himself. All right, and he made a statement even before while he was alive, that he feared being judged not for what he said, but what he didn't say. But you know, if you're going to come out and you're going to tell me that there's this guy named Johannes Blumenbach that divided everyone up into 5 different races, and he put the white man at the top and the black man at the bottom, and that's how the white supremacist founders of this country, that's what they used to justify their white supremacy and their slavery, then let's get the facts straight, because we're going to have to find somebody else to blame. Do I need to defend Johannes Blumenbach? No, I don't know who he was, and he's dead, okay? But the point is that we need to base our foundations and our statements on foundations of truth. And Blumenbach said the absolute opposite of what we're being told that Blumenbach actually said. He did the opposite of what he They said he said. Okay? So we have this statement that, another statement that racism is a white, getting back to the statement that racism is the ideology of white people, that it's a construct of white people, then we have to look at it a little bit further. And because as I'm listening further to this man and I'm reading in this book, what I'm finding out is that I hear this statement: the Jews invented racism. And I'm given biblical references to point out how the Jews invented racism. Well, the same person who says that the Jews invented racism in the first century, and that's a direct quote, the Jews invented racism. Well, the same person who says that the Jews and the chosen people of God were actually Negroes. Abraham was a Negro. Isaac, Jacob, and all those ancient Israelites were actually Negroes. And so the people in Jesus' time and the people in the first century church, they were Negroes. And it was the Jews that invented racism. Well, big question, was it the Jews, or if it's the white people that invented racism and it's a social construct of white people 300 years ago, or was it the social construct of the Jews 2,000 years ago? So who did it first? And I should even back up. This is not even a question of who did it first. The point is, it was done. Okay? But the thing is, you can't have it both ways. You can't say, well, before 300 years ago, there was no such thing as black and white. There was no such thing as race and racism. Racism was invented by white people as a white social construct. And then at the same time say that Jews invented invented racism 2,000 years ago. And the people that you call Jews were actually Negroes. How do we reconcile that? Okay? Now, I'm pointing this out as just an inconsistency to show that, you take little statements like this and it causes confusion, okay? So here's another attack against the forefathers of this country. Now, I'm going to read word for word. Thomas Jefferson bragged to George Washington that the birth of black children was increasing Virginia's capital stock by 4% annually. And he gives a reference. I'm not going to give the reference. Now, if what you're saying is true, and indeed Thomas Jefferson bragged to George Washington, then I believe that there should be no problem in giving a reference that pinpoints instead of a vague reference, okay? Because what happens, and this has happened like several times in the book now, where I've gone and looked at the references, and if you're making a postulation that is irrefutable, and you know it's irrefutable, there is no problem with giving a pinpoint reference. Here's where I got this. I got this from this book, from this chapter, page such and such. Okay? But if you're making a point that is spurious, there's possibility of doubt on it, then you say, well, here's this reference, and it's kind of like going, the references to a blog, okay? It's kind of like saying, well, You know, the earth is flat, and I want you to believe this. Take my word for it. And so give me a reference. Oh, it's down at the library on Main Street. That's where you can find it. Because when I go to this reference to check out if Thomas Jefferson actually bragged to George Washington that the breeding and the birthing of black children was decreasing Virginia's capital stock by 4% annually, if I go to that reference, I would expect to be able to find it there. Well, what happens is when I go to that blog that he's referencing, I find hundreds of articles that I've got to sift through to find that out. And so at some point, I'm going to supposedly just going to give up and go, well, I guess it's true. And I'm going to go on and I'm going to read the book instead of researching it. But what happens when you keep on and you say, we're not going to leave any stone unturned. We're going to find this. If it takes hours, we're going to find it. So you keep on through this blog and you finally find it. And this person who wrote this is word for word verbatim. I'm going to read it again. The person in the blog writes, Thomas Jefferson bragged to George Washington that the birth of black children was increasing Virginia's capital stock by 4% annually. In quotations. In the blog, it's in quotations. But he doesn't give a reference. Well, where do we go from there? Well, you just keep on looking and, like a bulldog, you just hold on to it, don't let go. And eventually you find it. It's out of a book. And in that book, you read, in quotes, Thomas Jefferson bragged to George Washington that the birth of black children was increasing Virginia's capital stock by 4% annually. And in that book, that's where it ends. There is the person who wrote the book made it up. There's no other explanation. He made it up. Okay? So apparently there was a letter. From there you have to go to this. Apparently there was a letter from Thomas Jefferson to someone, and you finally found the letter. It took me 2 days of looking to actually find the source for where these words came from that were twisted by the person 3 references down from the author's references. Okay? So the authors made a quote of a original statement, or actually a quote of original statement, and that statement is just a made up statement by somebody who wanted to be less than honest. You finally find this letter, and what you find is that in this letter that he wrote to George Washington, he never bragged to George Washington anything. In this letter, almost like a footnote, over to the side of the letter is a barely legible mathematical calculation by Thomas Jefferson that said that if you can interpret it, because again they say it was barely legible, but it appears like that he made a little scribble on his letter that said his capital stock, no, not even his capital, his profits, not his capital stock, his profits had increased by 4% annually by the birthing of black children to slaves, and instead of having to go and buy them. And in the book, they go on to talk about how he had almost a unending profit. Not the author's book. I'm talking about the book where the lie is told. Okay, but see, George Washington never wrote. Oh, Thomas Jefferson never wrote a letter to George Washington bragging about Virginia's capital stock. He never said anything about Virginia's capital stock. He talked about his own profits. Now, do I agree with what he said? No, I don't agree with what he said. I think that's wrong. I think it's immoral. The point is that if you're going to make a statement in a book that you say that God has told you to write, that you say that it's prophetic, because it's what you're writing down is God's mind, is what God has to say. Okay, if you're going to write a book that way, then God is not inaccurate. God is not the author of half-truths or quotes within quotes within quotes that lead to a lie that somebody said that was intellectually dishonest. All right. Now here's another one, word for word. During the early colonial period in America, many white Christians believed that they were in the promised land. There's some truth to that. I actually did some studying about that a long time ago, probably right after I was out of high school, and I'm sure there's some truth to that. They actually taught that this was the millennial period of Christ, and they were prepared for his return. The colored people were predestined to slavery, in parenthesis, picking cotton and working in their fields for 1,000 years because of cursed Ham and his children. Now I'm going to read that again without the parentheses, because the parentheses is really not germane, but during the early colonial period in America, many white Christians believed that they were in the promised land. They actually taught that this was the millennial period of Christ, and they were prepared for his return. The colored people were predestined to slavery because of cursed Ham and his children. Okay? And I'm giving a reference, American Millennium Vision, 1776 to 1800. James H. Smiley. Now, the first thing that happened when I saw this, I thought, I know who this James H. Smiley guy is. And James H. Smiley is was a renowned Presbyterian historian and a minister. And I thought, well, you know what? There's probably no sense in chasing that one down, because, James H. Smiley is he's a valid authority in my book. So I read on past it, and I went back, and then I thought, no, I'm going to chase it down. So, again, any logical person who reads the reference American Millennium Vision would think that that is a book. Okay? So, doing my due diligence again, I go and I type in James Hutchinson Smiley, and I look down all of the references. Says these are all the books that James H. Smiley wrote. Because the logical process would say that that's a book. American Millennialism Vision, 1776 to 1800. I don't find that book in there anywhere. So, geez, what? I don't understand. So I keep looking and looking. I spent hours looking for this book. We can't find a book. And just about any other book that you want to find on the internet, you can find that book. I don't care how old it is, you can find a book. But I can't find this book. Well, again, I'm thinking back to the last time where I was given a reference that was a ballpark reference, where I'm taken to a blog site, And I have to sift through, and I'm thinking, well, what if it's the other way around? What if this isn't a book? What if it's something else? So then the only way that I can find this out is that I have to subscribe. So I subscribed, and I paid more money for the subscription than I paid for this book that I'm researching by this author. After I subscribed, that's where I found out once you get into their website, you can type in keywords. Well, I typed in keywords, and nothing ever came up. And finally, I kept on, and I typed in American Millennium Vision, and guess what I found? Well, American Millennium Vision, 1776 to 1880, is a chapter out of one of these books. Well, no wonder it doesn't show up in his authorship. In the list of things that the Presbyterian website says the books that he wrote, of course it's not going to show up because it's a chapter. Well, if the author wanted me to be able to verify this and it's irrefutable, and there's no way to refute it, what he's saying is absolutely true, then he could have easily just named the book, because the name, you have to get to the book to get to the chapter, and the name of the book is, I believe, the Journal of Presbyterian History. And so I go to the Journal of Presbyterian History, and I'm wondering, well, why in this book did he not put down the Journal of Presbyterian History by James H. Smiley? That would have saved a lot of time. And I'm thinking, and I don't want to judge here, but I'm thinking to myself, you know what? It appears to me that the author of this book doesn't really want me to find this. Okay? But I thought, no, I'm not going to judge. That's just being judgmental. It's not fair. It's prejudging, and it's not fair. But I finally downloaded this chapter. And I'm going to remind you, in case you're wondering why I'm doing this, is because the author of this book says he issues a challenge to anybody to prove him wrong. Anybody who doesn't believe what he's saying, or anybody who he issues a challenge that says, prove me wrong. Well, he doesn't really even have to issue that challenge. If what you're saying is truth, you don't have to say that. But I'm not so much in here trying to prove him wrong. I'm here trying to find out what the truth is. I'm a truth seeker. And I'm not here to prove anybody wrong. I'm here to find out what the truth really is. If somebody gives me something they say is truth, I'm going to find out if it's truth. And then when I look and I find out it's not truth, that's where we have a problem. So as I'm reading in this book, or in this article, I read the whole article. I mean, not the article, the whole chapter. I read the chapter twice, and I'm not seeing anything like this. So I thought, well, maybe it's me, and maybe I'm just missing it, because you can miss stuff reading. So I'm looking for even a concept of that. So I typed in keywords. They have a word search on my search on the program that I downloaded to. It has a word search. So I typed in colored. No, I don't get any hits. I typed in predestined. Don't get any hits. Slavery. Don't get any hits. I get, well, I do slave. I don't get any hits. Slaves. I don't get any hits. And then predestined, predestination, predestines. I don't get any hits. Cursed, I don't get any hits. Curses, I don't get any hits. Ham, don't get any hits. Children, child, I don't get any hits. So I keep on going, and I just keep on like what every possible word form I could think of to try to find out where this is in this book or in this chapter of this book. And so when I typed in Ham, I thought, well, surely it says because of cursed Ham and his children. I thought surely Ham would be mentioned in the book somewhere by this author, J. Smiley. And I type in Ham, and I don't get anything but Hampton and Hamilton, and I get nothing about Ham. So go back and read the article. I read it 3 more times, over and over again. I read it. Where is this? And I finally found it. It just so happened that one of the pages the page that it was on, just kept not showing up. And I turned my computer off and turned it back on and made some adjustments, and come to find out I took it to another format and another reading format like Kindle, Barnes & Noble, whatever it was. Well, sure enough, it showed up. And this is what I found is that after I finally typed in slavery, it showed up on this page that I wasn't seeing. Well, sure enough, that's the only place that it is. And here's what the early colonists who believed that they were in the millennium, that they were in the promised land, actually believed. They believed that there was a good chance that they were going to be judged by God if they were in the millennium, that there was a good chance they were going to mess it all up and get judged by God because they had slaves. And nowhere in this article by James or this book or this chapter does it say that the colored people were predestined to slavery. What it says is exactly the opposite. Okay, and I'm going to put emphasis around that. Exactly the opposite, because what they said was they sought a 1,000 years where the slave would be set at liberty for 1,000 years. That's what they were looking for. They had other ideas that if this was truly the 1,000-year reign of Christ that they were in, and they were in the New Jerusalem, that they could possibly set the slaves free, evangelize them, and send them back to Africa as missionaries, or set them free in increments and incorporate them into society. They had all these ideas that they wanted to do, but in nowhere did they say that the colored slave or the Negro slave was predestined to slavery for 1,000 years because of cursed Ham and his children. But if you read this to any thinking person with 2 brain cells, they actually taught that this was a millennial period and they were prepared for his return, God's return, or Jesus' return. The colored people were predestined to slavery because of cursed Ham. And here's the reference: American Millennial Vision, 1776, 1800, James H. Smiley. I hate to use this word, but we have in my industry what we call what the hell moments. That was one of them. Because I'm sitting here and I'm having to face the harsh reality that the author of this book didn't make a quote of a quote of a quote and fail to follow it all the way through to see about the veracity of it. He made a statement that is patently untrue in his own words. And in that article, now if there's some other place that they thought that, if there's some other place that they thought that the colored people were predestined to slavery, picking cotton and working in the fields for 1,000 years, then it needs to be referenced. But it's not. The reference is in a book, again, the Journal of Presbyterian History by James H. Smiley, and it is in the chapter called American Millennium Vision, 1776 to 1800. Now, the author of this book, I'm not going to name his name, but this is what happens when you do research. You find out things like this man's name, the man who wrote this book that I'm researching, guess what? It shows up in this chapter of this book by James H. Smiley. This man's name shows up. That would kind of give you an idea that I read all of it. I read everything there was to read in it. And so it's not the same person. I guess this other person by the same name lived a long time ago. But I just thought that was a little ironic. I just threw that in there. And it makes me wonder if he actually read the whole chapter. I'm willing to bet you he would have found that his name showed up in there. But I kind of have my doubts he read the whole chapter. I kind of have my doubts that he read anything but that's one or two paragraphs. And he came up with his own words, and it's not true. It's just not true. And here's another one, and after this, I'm going to stop because there's no sense in keeping on going. So far, I've listed you 3 instances, starting with Johannes Blumenbach, and then going to Thomas Jefferson, and then going to the article by James H., or the chapter of a book by James H. Smiley, and all concerning the founders and colonial America and the white supremacist history and white supremacist beliefs, so-called, that the founders had. Here's another one, and this doesn't really deal with the founders, but it's against America, okay? And, you know, if you need to make America look bad to get your point across, this is a shining example, okay? This is by the author of the book that I'm researching. This is a statement verbatim. It started in America. If you study the history of the Holocaust in Europe, you will learn that eugenics, racism in America is where Hitler got his inspiration. I'm going to read that again. It started in America. If you study the history of the Holocaust in Europe, you will learn that eugenics, racism in America is where Hitler got his inspiration. Now, it just so happens that there were some Nazi doctors and scientists who were put on trial for their atrocities during the Holocaust. And what they did was they pointed and blamed Margaret Sanger, who some people say was a Nazi sympathizer. That's beyond the point. They blamed Margaret Sanger, and she was the founder of Planned Parenthood. Well, that doesn't really justify this statement that I just read to you, okay? Because in actuality, it was, 1994 that I was reading this and studied this out about Hitler and the Holocaust and his racist and his what Hitler did was he divided and conquered through racism also. And kind of the nature of tyrants, okay? Hitler's inspiration for racism or eugenics or genocide against the Jews came from the writings of people like Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, who was a theosophist, which is just another word for Luciferian. She was a big force during the Enlightenment, and she started the Theosophical Society, which actually, as its logo, has a Nazi swastika on it. Okay, and Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, from here on just Blavatsky, she taught the root races. She believed in the root races, and there was, I don't remember how many root races, but the one at the top, talking about putting the white man at the top and the black man at the bottom, this is one of the examples I'm talking about. Blavatsky called the supreme root race being the Aryans. The Aryans were the people that God had placed on the earth to advance civilization. They were supreme beings. Hitler was an Aryan, okay? That was his belief system. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed, or the fair-skinned, blue-eyed, white European supreme race. Okay. Now, Blavatsky was a Luciferian. She taught that there were ascended masters, and that there would be a Messiah that would not be, it wasn't Jesus Christ, it was an ascended Messiah, and her books were Vices Unveiled and The Secret Doctrine. And these were books that Hitler himself had quoted from. He read these books. There are many who say that he was the disciple of Blavatsky. And she was around like 1880s, 1888, 1889. And, you know, she had bragged that whole sections of the Bible were being cut out, and the Bible was being rewritten, and to show who the true God of the world is. And she's a sick lady, okay? But that's where Hitler got his inspiration, and that's not the only place Hitler got his inspiration. Hitler had in his SS a whole gaggle of theologians, anti-Semitic theologians, who wrote lexicons, dictionaries, Bible dictionaries, and one of them was Gerhard Kittel. I believe that was his name. I could be mistaken, but I believe it was Gerhard Kittel. I'm relying on memory here. And Gerhard Kittel provided him with demeaning caricatures of Jews with big noses and doing stupid things and being inhuman, doing things that humans don't do. And he provided Hitler with a theological justification, because what Hitler was dealing with was his paradigm was in the middle of a largely Christian geographical area. So if you act, so I'm going to have to reword that because I'm going to say that if you study the Holocaust in Europe, you'll learn that eugenics, genocide, and racism, that where Hitler got his inspiration from was from Luciferians, anti-Semitic theologians, and Helena Petrovna Blavatsky was not the only person, but she wasn't the only occult source. But that's where he got his inspiration from. And Hitler didn't mention in his writings that he didn't talk about well, America. Look what happened to America. Hey, that sounds like a good thing to do. No, he mentioned Blavatsky and all these other people from Luciferian and occult theosophical belief systems who taught ascended masters and New Age theory or New Age doctrines in what they call the occult revival of the 1800s and the early 1900s in Europe. So that's where he got his inspiration from. And it's to me, this statement is just a deliberate reaching at straws to try to make America look bad, to try to place the Holocaust at the feet of America via Hitler. And so it all boils down to this, that if you're going to try to convince me that my country was founded on the roots of white supremacy by evil men who were white supremacists, and they wanted to build a white country run and governed for white people, governed by white people, and governed specifically, more specifically, governed by white supremacists. Okay, and you want to convince me of all these things, then for the love of God, speak truth. Don't give me intellectual dishonesty. Don't give me quotes within quotes that lead me on a wild goose chase to find out that it was never said. And don't make things up that were never spoken, that were never believed, that, you just, if you want me to believe this stuff, then give me something that's absolute truth. Give me references that's absolute truth, that are irrefutable, that, like I said, it took me hours to run some of these things down, but that's a relatively short period of time to find out what truth is. And that's the nature of research. If you don't do research in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and find out what truth is, sometimes it takes hours, days, weeks, and months of research to get to the bottom and find out what truth is. So I'm going to end there. And again, I'm not here to fuss. I'm not here as an angry white man. I'm not here as a bigot, as is being inferred that I am. I'm going to say this. Do I have a right to be? No. And do I have a reason to be? Have a reason to be indignant. I'm going to tell you why. And I thought I was going to close, but this comes to mind, is that this author has taken a lot of liberty to down white people, to down our founding fathers as being white supremacists, as being evil. He's taken a lot of liberty to down current white people for making excuses for the evil founders of this country. He's taken a lot of liberty to state how evil this country is based on its evil roots. And he's taken the liberty to say, challenge me. And what I've discovered with this man is that when he gets challenged publicly, he asks you not to post, okay? When he doesn't like to be challenged, he doesn't want to be challenged. And what I've seen in his book has shown me that it appears to me, I'm not accusing, it appears to me that by his references, when you give a vague reference to a spurious statement, it's kind of hoping that nobody will take the time to research it and challenge it. They'll just take it at face value. And in my conversations with this man, or conversation with this man over the phone, I never said one derogatory thing about black people. But in my opinion, the way it came across to me was I got machine gunned by derogatory statements about white people, about the white founding fathers, and in fact, derogatory statements about white people today, because that we are the beneficiaries of this evil system set up by our white supremacist forefathers, and so we're complicit, we're guilty, and we need to face it. And out of the book, I'm going to read you quotes. So the primary burden of righting this wrong should be on the backs of white Christian men. On the same page, the proper terms for healing this gaping hole of racism must begin with white men being conciliatory towards black men. Let's read it again just in case we didn't understand it. So the primary burden for righting this wrong should be on the backs of white Christian men. And a few lines down, the proper terms for healing this gaping hole of racism must begin with white men being conciliatory towards black men. So when you have a person who takes the liberty to make inflammatory and incendiary remarks, then it's not about black and white. It's about truth, okay? But when you have a person that makes incendiary remarks and just continually, and they send you over text, they send you their videos, the next videos I'd like for you to watch. I mean, why would he send it to me if he didn't want me to watch it, okay? So they send me video over text. I want, here's the video, but then when I respond and say, I have a challenge to it, it says, don't text me on this stuff, I don't have time for it, okay? Or on social media, in the public forum, he makes statements that I don't agree with and that are disproven, or easily disproven, and I challenge them because they're not, even as the examples that I've showed you in this book. And he said, and then you get this, well, don't post this stuff. When you post this stuff, it makes you look like an angry white man, makes you look like a bigot. Or when you post this stuff, it makes you look like you support the corrupt fathers. And when you're actually told, don't respond to what I say. And those are just the two shine examples right now. What I'm hearing is the leftist Marxist tactic of oppose or silence all opposing voices, okay? And so I would say to the author, if you want reconciliation, if you believe that the white person, the white man, has the onus upon him to make the first move, the white man has the first move to be conciliatory towards the black man, then Don't oppose dissenting voices. Don't oppose those who come out and say, you, you're being intellectually dishonest. Don't oppose those who give you an opposing viewpoint um, that shows that your scholarship or that your technique in writing or whatever is less than honest. And see, I'm willing to be corrected. I have a viewpoint, and my viewpoint may not be right, and I'm willing to be corrected and admonished and change my viewpoint. But in order to do that, I have to be willing to hear an opposing voice. Okay, and so if you have a viewpoint that is salient, is inflammatory to a lot of people, and you're not willing to be opposed, you're not willing to hear a dissenting voice, then what you're really doing is you're shutting down opposing voices in the classic way by using the term racist or angry white man, bigot. And I don't think that's right. So I'm going to end there, and maybe we'll pick it up again sometime when I've got time. And right now, I will say this. I'm still researching the book, and when I'm done, Mr. Author, I'm still willing to get on the phone and talk with you about it. And that's pretty much all I need to say right now.